Hello, I'm Mark Mattioli, and welcome to another reading of Boston Accent. Boston Accent is available on Amazon.com, and it's a mature subject matter. We're going to quickly pick up where we left off. All right. The following weekend, I'm with Kevin, and it's our last weekend together as he has accepted a mechanic's position in Oakland, California, working with his sister's boyfriend. He'll fly to the West Coast on Tuesday and start the following Monday. My old friend Phil is in California also, in Sacramento, where he arrived 6 months ago. He's working nights as a security guard and going to school during the day. Both Phil and Kevin have given me an open invitation to come out and visit them, and I think I would like to sometime. I filled Kevin in on the excitement he missed the weekend before in Danforth with the brawl, and he tells me that's the last thing he wants to get involved with tonight, so behave myself. I tell him I'm in a different frame of mind tonight and not to worry. We end up on the beach in Marlin, where locals have made huge bonfires up and down the beach. Kevin and I both spot people we know. We separate to talk to them and agree to meet back at the car if we can't find each other on the beach. Less than an hour goes by before a fight breaks out and a crowd gathers to watch. While the crowd is watching the first fight, a second fight breaks out and the crowd forms a circle around the second fight as well. I'm trying to watch both fights at the same time when the guy I'm talking to points at the second fight and says, "Isn't that the guy you came with?" I can't see worth beans in the dark, but Kevin is no fighter, and he made a point of saying he'd be the last person I would see fighting tonight. The two fighters are in a clinch, hanging on to each other, with no punches being thrown, when they suddenly release each other and walk away. I see one of the fighters pull his shirt off, which is ripped up the side, and use it to wipe blood from his nose and lip. As I get closer, I see that's Kevin, and I say, "What the fuck was that all about?" Kevin is breathing hard, trying to catch his breath, and he says, "I was standing next to this guy, watching the first fight. He called one of the fighters by name, so I asked him if the guy was his friend, and he said, 'Mind your own fucking business.' So I said, 'Excuse the fuck out of me, asshole,' and he hit me." It's funny how that works. I just cracked up laughing and couldn't stop. Between what had happened to me last week and Kevin's vow to stay out of trouble, to the sight of him wiping the blood off his face and being all pissed off, I found the whole thing hysterical. Kevin didn't get it. He really did. The very next day, I ended up driving around with Brett and this new girl he had met whose father was a local cop. Brett had a girlfriend and was just messing around with this girl, and I got the impression that she was pretty wild. Brett stopped at his house for something, found out his girlfriend was looking for him, and asked me to drive this other girl home. She looked at me and said, "I don't want to go home." I called a friend I hadn't seen in a while, and he said he was taking his girlfriend to the drive-in, and we were welcome to join them. I hadn't been to the drive-in since I had taken Angie the year before, so I thought it would be fun. I had horrified Angie on that night. We left during intermission to get more beer at the Packy, and when we returned, I drove in through the exit. Cops saw me and ran over to my car, accusing me of sneaking in. I explained we'd already been here and had run out of beer. He asked for IDs, and Angie didn't have one, only being 15. She was practically in tears, saying, "I'm not drinking." The cop recognized my last name as the same as a cop in Portnoy and asked if we were related. I said, "He's my uncle." And the cop said, "He's a good man. You two have a good night. Don't drink too much." That would never happen nowadays. Are you shitting me? God, I miss the old days. That part I miss. Okay. For me, this was just another night. I talked to cops nearly every weekend for one thing or another. But to Angie, it was something she wasn't comfortable with. Now I'm at the same drive-in with a cop's daughter in the back seat. I have known this girl for less than 12 hours, and halfway through the first movie, she has her face in my lap, and it's her idea. The car we're in is a Mustang with bucket seats, and the back seat is cramped for someone tall like me. Now I have this girl bobbing for apples, and her head is going up and down in between the bucket seats. My buddy and his girlfriend had been leaning in towards each other, but now have leaned away to give the bobber room to work. Neither one of them ever turns around or makes a comment, and it's all I can do not to laugh. Later that night, we were at my buddy's house, and he let me use the spare bedroom to take the cop's daughter in. We have sex, and I was concerned because she smelled a little ripe. Now, mind you, this girl was no beauty queen, but she didn't look homeless either. She just did not appear to practice proper feminine hygiene, and this was something I had not run into at this juncture in my life. Bottom line is she smelled bad, and I gave it to her anyway. Turned out it wasn't the best call I could have made. It didn't take long before I was itching really bad in my genital region, and upon close examination, I found critters walking around. The cop's daughter had given me crabs. I remember Jeff telling me he had had them recently, and I called him for advice. He told me you need to use a prescription cream, and he had some left over, so I headed over to Jeff's to grab it. The next morning, I got a phone call from Sean, and he tells me that a guy he works with is a relative of Diana's, and then she got married the previous weekend to a local trucker. She had known this guy a couple of months, and he fell in love with her, baby and all, and proposed. Diana felt it was the best move for her and the baby, even though she didn't love this guy. I had no right to be upset, but I was. I started thinking about the baby and wondering if this meant I would not be a part of its life. I had to go to work, and the whole ride in, all I could think of was I screwed up. I should be there for Diana and the baby, not some stranger. By the time I get to work, I'm a mess. I tell my supervisor I won't be able to work. I'm too upset, I leave. On the way home, I get this idea in my head that I need to get away, as far away from here as possible. When I get home, I call Phil, and I ask him if he can put me up for a while. He said he would ask his roommate, a Mexican girl that owned the house, if I can sleep on the back porch, which is a 3-season porch with no heat. I said, what do I need heat for? It's California. He calls me right back and says, no problem. And to let him know when I'm coming and how I'm coming so he can meet me. I drive to the bus station, get a cross-country schedule, and buy a one-way ticket to Sacramento, leaving in 6 days. It will take nearly 5 days to get there, and I will have to change buses 4 times. I get home, call work, and give my immediate notice and say I will be in at the end of the week to get my last check. I let Phil know my arrival time, and then I call Kevin in Oakland to let him know that I'm coming. I'll let everyone know I'm leaving except my family. My relations with them has become so bad that I decided to just vanish. I had a good relationship with my brother and sister, but they were much younger than me, and I rarely spent any time with them. I ran into a friend of the family, and I let slip that I was leaving, and she called my mother the day before I left to ask her how she felt about me moving all the way to California. My mother was like, I didn't know what you're talking about. I'm packing my bags and separating things I decided to give away to my brother or to friends when my mother walks in my room and says, you weren't going to tell us? You were just going to leave? That's right, I say with my back to her. My mother breaks down and tells me she's sorry, that she had done her best, and then she leaves the room and doesn't speak to me again until I'm walking out the door for what I think is the last time. Someone called Diana and told her I was leaving, and she called me to see if she could stop by and say goodbye. Against my best judgment, I said, okay. She showed up on the afternoon I was to leave, and she was huge at 6 months pregnant. I had not seen her for 3 months, so she had changed a lot. She closed my bedroom door, locked it, smiled at me, and asked if I had ever seen a 6-month pregnant woman naked before. I said, "No," and she stripped off her clothes. I said, "How long have you been married? This isn't a good sign." She lay down next to me and showed me how to take her without hurting her or the baby. It was very foreign to me because it was so much more like love than sex. We both confessed that we had wished things had turned out different. If they had, this moment we just shared would have had such different meaning. We held each other, and there were tears streaming down both our cheeks. We dressed, and I walked her out to a car and said goodbye. It would be 14 months before we saw each other again. Later that evening, my friend Roy Barston showed up with Brett, Donnie, and Jeff to bring me to the bus terminal. My mother took my picture as I was walking down the hall with my bags. As I turned to say goodbye, my mother, sister, and brother were all crying. I set down my bags and embraced them all one by one, saying I would write them. Ralph watched the scene from a distance and never said a word. I started to leave when my grandfather appeared in the room looking very old and very sad, and he said, "Leaving without saying goodbye?" And I crossed the room and shook his hand. He was a manly man. I don't remember ever embracing him since I was a child. He just thought it would make him uncomfortable. I had said all my goodbyes, and out the door I went. 2 hours later, I was on a Trailways bus filled with a mix of sadness, excitement, and anticipation of what lay ahead of me. Okay. The book is going to change significantly now. We're leaving Boston, and we're headed to the West Coast. I'll read a little bit of this, but then we're going to have to stop because it's just very lengthy. So I'll just give you a little tease here. We're running out of time. Drum roll. Chapter 8. California. Okay, enough of that. California. The first leg of my bus trip was uneventful. A straight shot to New York City, where I had a 1-hour layover and a bus change. Once on the bus out of New York, I made friends with 2 guys sitting near me at the back of the bus. The 2 guys, it turned out, were not together and were meeting for the first time as well. Although they were close to my age of 22, they were a lot bigger than me in height and weight. Steve was the bigger of the 2, at 6'8" and well over 200 pounds. He'd just gotten out of jail after serving 2 years for punching an on-duty cop in a barroom brawl. The other guy, Mike, was not as tall at 6'3", but he was wide as a house at 260 pounds. Mike was on his way to visit his sister in San Francisco, and Steve had been in New York on vacation when he got arrested. And he was finally headed home to Los Angeles. It was after midnight as we left New York, and after brief introductions, we all tried to get some sleep. All right. That's all I got time for, because I know that it's going to get, we don't have any time for that. This next segment is way too long. But that's good. We started California. We're out of Boston. This adventure is just really beginning. And I tell you, it's going to get freaking crazy from here on. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and don't send me any of your therapist bills, okay? You guys have nightmares? That's too bad. I had to live it. Well, up here. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. We're reading Boston Accent. I'm Mark Mattioli, and we'll see you next time. Amazon.com. Ciao.